Welcome to another Founder Wisdom Pod. We have Ron Lasorsa with us today. He's founder of Victory Litigation Funds. We're gonna talk about his background. He's a veteran also. He's bringing lawyers and ethical investors together for the benefit of veterans. He intends to secure justice for all veterans affected by military service-related toxic exposure using tokenized litigation finance prime brokerage. So we're going to talk about what that means today, but certainly a very interesting project. So it's the first time I see one of these. Lots of overlapping areas, whether it comes to veterans, legal, and tokenization, which is always a cool topic on this podcast. This pod is brought to you by bookwritegpt.com. Bookwrite GPT is a tool that helps you write a book with your LinkedIn posts. So we take all of your LinkedIn posts and craft it into a beautiful book, which you can publish on Kindle. So if you want a free credit, you can go to bookwritegpt.com. Ron, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Great. Well, Charles, again, thank you so much for the invitation. I really, as I was saying to you before we went live, your timing is impeccable because I'm about to launch what I characterize as the most altruistic, impactful, and profitable project that, many people will ever be involved in. So, those are bold statements, but I can back them up. And, this is a perfect forum for me to at least, start advertising this project.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's start with your background as a veteran. So tell me about your story.
I'm a 1989 graduate of the Naval Academy. I was commissioned a second lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps. I was an infantry officer in Desert Shield and Desert Storm. So I'm a combat veteran. When I got back from the war, I was stationed at Camp Lejeune's School of Infantry, where I was a company commander. During that time, I identified a huge issue with the water in the barracks. And I wrote an Inspector General report to the base commanding general. And when he got that report, he made me his aide de camp, which is a big deal, right? I poured a lot of coffee, I opened a lot of doors, but more importantly, it gave me exposure to how general officers lead large groups of people. And but I was frustrated with the Marine Corps because, in the military, there's something called time in service. So regardless of your performance, you can't be promoted based upon that. You got to be, timing grade. So I had the best jobs one could have as a captain while I was a first lieutenant. I was combat unit commander during the war as a second lieutenant, and then a company commander and an aide de camp as a first lieutenant. Really wasn't a lot of room for me to be promoted for the next 7 years. So, the general that I was working for gave me the opportunity to get my MBA while I was on active duty, and I got a job on Wall Street. So I went to Wall Street. It was another Marine that hired me at JP Morgan, and I was an investment banker, a derivatives trader, and I really got broad exposure to the financial markets. During that time, I went through an adversarial divorce and was introduced to the legal system and just how vicious attorneys could be, but more importantly, how profitable the business of law was. And so I left Wall Street, attended exactly one class of law school before I decided I was not temperamentally suited for the practice of law, and I've since become a subject matter expert in the business of law. So fast forward all these years, I've accomplished many things in that space, including, and this is not common knowledge, but non-attorneys can own law firms. And as a non-attorney owner of a law firm, I've originated over 50,000 cases, and I actually had a $40 million exit. I sold a law firm in less than a year for $40 million. So I then went on and generated over $500 million in legal fees. But during that time, I became aware of an organized crime ring in these large mass tort and class action lawsuits, and which every consumer should know that there is a huge amount of identity theft in these large lawsuits. And the lawyers, they have what's referred to as plausible deniability, but of course, not everyone knows, but enough of them know what's going on. And based upon, my time in service while I was in the military, I had what was called Gulf War syndrome. I lost my hair after that. And my children, both my boys who were born on Camp Lejeune during my service, were born with neurobehavioral effects, which has now come, it's now, a known issue. It's called the Camp Lejeune Justice Act. It is the largest mass tort in American history. Over 400,000 claims have been filed, and it's only the third, a very rare instance where the U.S. government is allowing itself to be sued, and the burden to the taxpayer is going to be around $100 billion. So it's a huge issue that many people aren't familiar with, but I'm deeply immersed in that, and so in order to prevent veterans from having their identity stolen, I became an SEC whistleblower in 2022. And I have been fighting to bring this matter to public light since then. But I've been stopped at every turn by the Biden administration and this core group of attorneys. So now that President Trump is in office and they've established the Department of Government Efficiency, I'm about to take another crack at it through this project I'm launching. And so you had mentioned, I'll give you three phrases. One is guerrilla lawfare, and that's been more of a branding exercise where I'm the only person I'm the only veteran in the country that has the depth of experience in litigation finance. So I'm a bit of a unicorn. The second is that tokenized litigation finance prime brokerage business model, which is the ethical high watermark in legal services. And then I'll give you another phrase that I refer to, which is strategic philanthropy, right? And the strategic philanthropy is really groundbreaking because I know that you interview a lot of CEOs of businesses and venture capitalists and things of that nature. And there are really two pools of capital. You have the commercial capital, right? Investors who are looking to make money. But then you have about $500 billion a year in what I refer to as conscious capital, right? Those are people who donate to nonprofits with no expectation of economic return, but they want to see, they want to make fundamental change, whatever their cause is, right? So it's a huge pool of capital. Now, what I can do, let me just digress for a moment. Litigation finance is the most profitable asset class in the world, bar none, pound for pound. It's a smaller market, but in terms of the returns on investment, they're huge, right? Because
But one of the most unethical.
Yes, one of the most unethical because there are so few players in the mix. It's think of it more as a cartel, right? Drug trafficking, weapon trafficking, human trafficking, right? Those are the only businesses that might be more profitable than litigation finance. Honestly, because lawyers have created this barrier where normally they can't share legal fees with non-attorneys, right? They've feathered their nest very nicely. However, there's now an effort to allow non-attorneys to participate in that. And there are only two places in the United States, England, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, much smaller markets. They allow non-attorney ownership of law firms. But in the US, there are only two jurisdictions right now, the District of Columbia and Arizona. Those are the only two jurisdictions that own non-attorney ownership. I specialize in District of Columbia law firms. That's what I had previously. So again, the bottom line is that I'm in an asset class that's very rarefied, that can offer tremendous return on investment. And my idea is to take the profitability that would have otherwise gone to unethical lawyers and predatory investors, and instead put that into the philanthropic community, right? So
Right.
if I take money from donors instead of investors, it's my intention in this project to deliver a 100x impact enhancement.
Yeah, it's a very cool niche. And if done in an ethical way, if you really give back money to people that were damaged, that is super good, right? Which was the intended goal behind like the action lawsuits or whatever they're called. I have a bunch of questions for you because you mentioned a bunch of interesting topics there. First, tell me a bit more about the identity theft part of it. Let's double click on that one.
Certainly. So the way we did it, so when I had that $40 million exit, right, it was 15,000 cases that we'd originated in transvaginal mesh. And I had partnered with some folks, and what they were using was overseas call centers to steal identities. So the healthcare industry has outsourced a lot of their call center operations to India, right? And it's those Indian healthcare call centers that were selling patient medical data to legal intake call centers overseas, right? And every medical condition since Obamacare is identified by a particular code. And then there are diagnosis codes and there are treatment codes. So you can easily go in and say, okay, this mass tort is based upon this injury, right? And the value of that case is determined by these treatment codes. So it's you can easily identify who has been injured, right? And how much they're going to earn on a case. So that's actively happening right now in every mass tort. In this case, with Camp Lejeune and 3M Hearing Protection, which is another veteran-oriented, somebody in the VA is selling these medical records. So that is straight up, and it's no longer me just saying it, because one of these, these unethical lawyers was sued back in 2015. What they did, his name is Michael Watts. It's publicly available information. He was prosecuted by the Justice Department for conspiracy, mail-and wire fraud, and identity theft. And in it, he filed 40,000 fraudulent claims in the BP oil scandal, right? He spent about $10 million and he expected to make $2 billion. See the ROI there? But he got caught because he did silly shit like, putting in the names of dogs and just you got very, very soft. Oh, so but they don't. They're so arrogant. They're so arrogant. They don't cover their tracks like that. And that's it's so disgusting, right? The arrogance of it all, and nobody calls them out on this shit, right?
Tell me about Camp Lejeune specifically. What happened there? Did you mention like the source of water, or is it like just being born in a war zone?
No. So, and this is a very, again, most people are unaware of this, but in military service, you're above and beyond being shot at, right? You're exposed to a lot of toxic substances, Agent Orange in Vietnam, Gulf War syndrome in the Gulf. That's how I lost my hair. After I got back from the Persian Gulf, I was sick for 3 years. Right now they call it burn pits. There are any number of things that you can be exposed to. In the case of Camp Lejeune, the water at Camp Lejeune, the groundwater, became contaminated for a variety of reasons. And there are a number of different forever chemicals that they refer to that have poisoned the water. The Camp Lejeune Justice Act was a special interest bill that was inserted into a much larger bill called the PACT Act, Promise to Address Comprehensive Toxics, which expanded VA healthcare benefits for veterans, right? But this special interest bill gave a certain group of veterans who were stationed at a particular base during a particular time frame to sue for damages. And it's complete bullshit. Even though I was stationed at Camp Lejeune, the time frame was 1958 to 1987. So it was a truncated period, right? And I've since found out that the reason that it was that time period is because there's one database. The Department of Defense has one database that says from everybody that lived there at that time. So these lawyers were freaking lazy. They didn't want to search multiple databases. And I contend that water is still contaminated to this day. But there are a whole host of medical issues associated with that exposure. Cancers, all manner of things. In my case, both of my sons were born with neurobehavioral effects. And so I have skin in the game, so to speak. But the Camp Lejeune litigation, they only had 2 years. So they gave a certain amount of time for these law firms to retain clients. And right now it's in active negotiations. I had created, I was successful in creating what's referred to as the Navy elective option that puts settlement values between $100,000 and $450,000 for illnesses, an extra $100,000 if you passed away. So I've been at this a long time, and I got that in front of the Secretary of Defense under the Biden administration, but none of the lawyers advised their clients to take it because it capped legal fees at 20%, right? These lawyers are trying to take upwards of 49% of the legal award from the veterans. So it's screwed up on so many different levels, and there's nobody fighting on behalf of the veterans, right? It's the lawyers and the politicians who are colluding together to take all this money from taxpayers and veterans. It's disgusting.
Right. And tell me about your solution. How are you going to realistically make it happen? If the Biden administration was sort of against it, do you think this current administration is going to give you the green light? What's your thesis on that?
Well, so yes. First of all, the Department of Government Efficiency was identifying waste, fraud, and abuse in the executive branch, like Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. It's no longer Ron Lasorsa, the crazy man, claiming that identity theft is going on. There's more than sufficient evidence now that it's happening across the board. Number one. Number two, I filed a lawsuit against the lead counsel in the Camp Lejeune litigation, entered all my evidence, and the judge, we can go into the nuances, why they completely ignored my case because it would blow the head off. So I've moved to Washington, D.C., and this project is to get me a presidential executive order from President Trump for me to put in a claim verification program, right? And so this is a political campaign now, right? And so I'm working with lobbyists, and it's my intention. The vice president, J.D. Vance, is a Marine, he's an attorney, and he's from Appalachia, which is where my business is going to be located. So J.D. Vance is a natural ally in this, but there are any number of veteran sympathetic members of Congress, congressmen and senators that I can get in front of. So this is a public relations campaign, and this is why this podcast business model is so important, because once I get this word out, it's just banging the drum, right? And given all of President Trump's interaction with scumbag lawyers, I know he's going to give me that presidential executive order. How would he not? I can save up to $20 billion for taxpayers, right? I can make sure veterans get paid what they should get paid, right? And more importantly, I can identify the bad guys, the lawyers who are criminals.
Right. And the $20 billion tax saving, tell me a bit more about that. How would you actually save taxpayers' money?
Okay, so it's math in the sense that you have 400,000 claims right now, right? And the average anticipated settlement is going to be about $250,000 per veteran, right, who are injured, the average. So 250,000 times 400,000, that's about $100 billion, right? And the way the scam goes is roughly 20% of all leads, sometimes more, are fake. So if I saved taxpayers, right, 20% of $100 billion, that's $20 billion.
Okay. It's, I mean, it's interesting. What's the tokenization aspect of it? Did you just came up with that because the current administration is crypto friendly?
No. So again, there was a law filed by Congressman Darrell Issa called the Litigation Transparency Act. Filed it in 24. He refiled it in 25. There's a big issue because what happens is you have overseas, American geopolitical adversaries investing in these lawsuits. So you have Chinese money, you have Russian money, you have Iranian money funding these lawsuits in exchange for the returns, right? And so the security token provides granular transparency as to who the actual investors are. Right now, it's opaque. You don't know, like hedge funds, VCs are the ones funding law firms, and there is no transparency. You might know who the entity is, but you don't know who the individual investor is. And so tokenized litigation finance is using revenue share security tokens to raise money, and every investor is on the blockchain. Prime brokerage, when I was on Wall Street, is a suite of services that investment banks would offer hedge funds, right? I'm adapting that model to the legal services industry, where I would open another DC law firm and offer case origination, case management, and case finance. So you're marrying two ideas: the ethical high watermark to raise money, case finance, and then the most ethical way to originate cases and then manage the cases. So I would work with ethical attorneys to maximize their ROI. So for investors, I will offer, it's going to be called the token of justice. I'm going to offer a 10x return to investors. You give me $1, I'll pay you back 10. And that comes from the revenue associated with these legal fees. For the lawyers, right, there'll be a buy-in. I'm going to pay the lawyers 100x. Okay? So as a prime broker and an asset manager, I'm maximizing the return on investment for investors and attorneys. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm curious also, are you full-time into this? Because you had your exit, I believe, in 2015, right? So were you just living off the 14 million you made out of that exit since then, and you're hoping for another big home run with that one?
No, because that $40 million exit was just one transaction. I went on to originate $500 million for legal fees, and I had $100 million stolen from me from some of these bad guys. That's what gave me the information to be a whistleblower, right? I signed a non-disclosure agreement for $500,000. I was also on Wall Street for a lot. So I had money, right? But it's not so much about the money, because I intend to give away the majority of revenue I earn into this strategic philanthropy aspect, right? There are three things I am. I'm an activist, I'm an asset manager, and I'm a philanthropist, okay? One of the things that disgusts me is that veterans have to beg for money. You have veterans sleeping on the street, and these scumbag lawyers are living high on the hog. I intend to take the money that would have gone to them and put it into the veteran community, right? So this does not make sense from a business perspective, because I'm going to give away the majority of the money that I make, right, in order to effectuate change to the veteran, for the veteran community.
Right. And yeah, your background as a veteran, you've lived it, you've seen the effort that it takes to fight for your country, right? So I guess that's close to your heart. What are your top goals for this year? What do you want to execute this year that will make this project move forward?
Number one, the presidential executive order from President Trump doing the claim verification program. And then I have several lawsuits that I'm going to launch. A class action in 3M because veterans got ripped off from attorneys in that. But I believe we're entering into at least a decade long of litigation for that military service related toxic exposure issue. There have been over 2 million veterans who have been screened for additional health care benefits under the current PACT Act. 1.5 million have been approved. right? But those 1.5 million have no ability to sue the government like the Camp Lejeune lawyers do. So my goal, my mission is to achieve equal justice for those 1.5 million veterans who have been shut out. Lawyers don't care about veterans. They only care about getting rich. I intend to fight those guys in the court of public opinion, take that money from them and put it into the veteran community, right? And I'm the guy who can do it because I'm the whistleblower. I know where the bad guys are and I know a better way to do it. And they won't fight me on equal ground in the court of public opinion. They hide in the shadows like scumbags that they are and try to take shots at me. But I'm an infantry Marine, right? I fight these fights and I'm prepared to do things that they're not prepared to defend.
And what happened in Camp Lejeune? Do you feel it happened in other camps and other wars?
Well, absolutely. So again, this is the problem. This toxic exposure happens at every military base, just by virtue of the aviation fuel, uranium depleted artillery shell, tank shells, all manner of things. Being in the military is extremely dangerous, and people just don't understand.
Ultimately, it's like killing weapons, so they don't give a shit what's in there, right? Like it goes in the air. And
even worse, So again, vaccine injury. When you're in the military, you have no choice but to accept vaccines. I have since found out that Gulf War syndrome is vaccine related. Before I went overseas to the Persian Gulf, I stood in line with the rest of my unit. And I got 10 vaccines in one shot. 10 vaccines in one shot. And I was sick for 3 weeks after that. And when I got back, I was sick for 3 years. And, so military service related toxic exposure claims, but also vaccine injuries. These are litigations that I can litigate. I can bring them to the fore. I can work with Congress to change the law. That's the project. But it all starts with the claim verification program. I have to identify the waste, fraud, and abuse, find the bad guys, get them out of the mix, and the revenue associated with that project self-funds everything else.
Interesting. Ron, where can we find out more about you?
Well, as I'd mentioned before, I'm rebranding everything from Victory Litigation to Lasorsa Litigation. So the best way to reach me right now is on LinkedIn, right? And I'm really... This is just the first, Charles, as we mentioned, I want to know about your services because I'm going to be putting out a podcast, rebranding. The timing is perfect for this. So nobody needs to do anything right now. Just know I'm coming. If you want to reach out, LinkedIn. But I'm going to be hitting the ground running here shortly.
Right. That was Ron Lasorsa and Charles Cormier for another Founder